Bonner and Ryder is a law firm that is representing victims of a mass shooting at a top store in Buffalo in 2022. They are suing gun manufacturers and they are suing uh, social media platforms, claiming that the social media platforms create a dangerous product, and of course, making similar claims about firearm manufacturers because they can be used in such a way. To me, I always feel suing the gun manufacturers in this way is like suing a camera company because somebody uses it to make horrible types of movies. You get what I'm trying to say. But I'm not as big on the Second Amendment. I do believe we need it. I'm also probably a little bit more willing to accept. I do think there's reasonable gun control. Um, if you go to jail for a violent crime, you don't get your guns back easily. If um, if there's a question of your mental illness, they should be able to take your guns long enough to get you evaluated and then they are returned to you. But whenever that happens, it must be assumed if you are cleared of mental illness that may result in violence, you should be able to get your guns back. Red flag laws often cross that. But I wanted to talk more specifically about the social media rules. They tried to claim that it wasn't a lawsuit trying to against speech, except they're claiming that the social media platforms make a dangerous product because the content radicalized this shooter who apparently it was a racially motivated shooting. Um, there is absolutely types of speech that should not be allowed on this platform, even as somebody who thinks a platform like this should err on the side of freedom of speech. Slander. If you can show that somebody's slandering you, such as Alex Jones, when he had that conspiracy theorist on there. I'm not too bent out of shape over it. He tried to say he wasn't supporting him. Unless he can show he was being slandered by pushing back against this guy, or there's some kind of disclaimer or something, it was probably reasonable. Calls for immediate actual violence, or calls for violence against against groups. I don't care what kind of groups those are, but I think there's also a limit to context and everything else. And AI sure as hell shouldn't be trusted to make that decision because AI can't figure out context, for example, humor. H3H3 talked about bombing an NRA organization. Uh, I don't think he should be kicked off the platform. I despised H3H3 before I thought he was a left wing nut. When I first heard of this guy, I'm like, I don't understand how people like him. Okay, now to the next group. Now to the issue. Or slander, calls for actual violence, doxing, and harassment. What is not doxing harassment is criticism. Now, you might be assuming, why don't I mention bigotry per se? Because that's one of those words that is too easy to abuse to try and silence opposition voices. You want to talk about gang violence on an increase in certain parts of the country? Somebody can accuse you of using code language for black people, regardless of the fact that walking down the street, you don't think any of the black people you see are gang members. You talk about human trafficking cartel stuff that happens in Southern America. You're assuming the vast majority of legal immigrants, much like Hispanic citizens or whatever, is connected to that in some way. Of course they're not. So then you have to get into the woods. My main problem with this type of thought process is I don't think this is much different than video games, comic books, movies that they've tried to do. Unless you're calling for actual violence, you're going to have nut jobs that will take inspiration from this. But a guy who tried to kill the president did so because he was trying to get the attention of an actress who did not tell him to do it. He was nuts. A channel has recently suggested they've been shadow banned because content's not appearing in streams. They're not getting the views they were. And it seems like the algorithm is punishing them for being sword content, which has an implication of violence. Even the use of the N word can get you demonetized. And there's actually two N words that might do it. One starting with NI, the other one starting with NA. One of them is a derogatory term that I used to cringe when black people used it. The other one is the German Workers' Party, or the German National Party. Anyway, I fear that actually silencing political speech, political discussions, in the same way the lawsuits designed to prevent, uh, to hurt firearm manufacturers so they can't sell a a tool that we private citizens are allowed to have is a feature, not a bug. And the fact that this lawsuit was allowed to go forward scares me. Hopefully, hopefully, if they narrow if it does come out that there were certain things that shouldn't have been on this platform, legitimate things that shouldn't be on this platform, and they narrow it, curtail it, and can also be called out on if they try and push it too far to make it harder to have reasonable discussions on this platform. For the most part, I think this platform's actually not quite as bad as many people on the right like to claim. There's still right wing channels that are willing to engage in serious issues, and they are able to be found. I hope this doesn't make it harder. I hope the judge narrows it, but I do think this possibly should have been dismissed on slap grounds. Strategic lawsuit against public participation, which is what I fear this is.